Hi, I'm Ann Carter, and I'm here again with Pastor Richard Stadler, and we are talking about the readings for the Sunday, the fifth Sunday in Lent. The Old Testament lesson is Ezekiel 37, 1 through 14. The epistle is Romans 8, verses 6 through 11, and the gospel is from the book of John, chapter 11, verses 1 through 45. It's another long one. It's a beautiful one. I hope that you read it on your own, and I hope that you take a listen. We're going to there's a lot to talk about today, so I think we're going to be just doing some of the highlights.
Yeah. If we go to Ezekiel 37, it's the dry bones chapter.
Dem bones.
Yeah, we aren't going to sing that. Okay.
Okay.
but it's this wonderful vision that Ezekiel has. We think in captivity, Babylonian captivity, after the Babylonians have deported a whole bunch of Israelites.
So we're talking about 500 years before Jesus was born.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so he gets this vision, and I think it has some meanings on a couple different levels. These dry bones suddenly start rattling. They come together because the word is spoken over them. And then sinews come together, and flesh comes on, and skin comes on the bodies. And they rise up a mighty army. And God tells them, this is an indication to you that Israel thinks they're dead and that they have no life left, but I am going to put life into them. And on one level, that's a promise. I will bring you back to your homeland when the exile period is over. On another level, it's a reminder, I am the God of life. And so even when you die physically, there is a resurrection coming. And the gospel lesson will testify that Jews at the time of Jesus did believe that there was a resurrection of the body. That even though Sadducees didn't believe in that the Pharisees did, and that many Jews like Martha actually believed that was a reality. So here in the Old Testament lesson, there's a wonderful affirmation of that belief in bodily resurrection and the promise that God is capable of giving life to the dead, whether they be dead spiritually, emotionally, or whatever. He can revive them. And so it's a wonderful setup for what we're going to see in the gospel lesson with the resurrection of Lazarus.
It's a terrifying proposition.
In what way?
Well, to have witnessed that, to know that God can, as Jesus says, I can raise up stones.
Yeah.
I can do anything. I created this universe, and I can make it do whatever I want.
Oh, okay.
And so you have no control, do you, over God's creation? He does. He can give life where there was none. It's a great promise, but it's also...
It is scary to be in the presence of that much power.
Power, yes, yeah. That's what I'm trying to say.
And remember that when he heals the demoniac and sends the spirits into this herd of swine that go down and drown themselves in the Sea of Galilee, the people want to get rid of him because they are terrified
of that
by this much power. Yeah, he might use it against us, So you could see that here too embodied, is that the prospect, if you don't embrace this by faith, is to be scared that this could come against you.
Yeah, that's right. And again, in here, I highlighted that, as you said, the word was pronounced over them. The breath of life was breathed on them. But then they were waiting. There's a lot of waiting.
Yeah.
Waiting in, the psalm that goes with this is Psalm 130, out of the depths I cry to you. I wait for the Lord. Yeah. And again, we wait for return from exile. We wait for God to do. Martha and Mary waited. There's a lot of... We live in a society where, what did Carrie Fisher say? Instant gratification doesn't come soon enough. So for us to be in that state of waiting for God to act takes power away from us again, doesn't it?
Yes. And that's why the epistle lesson is a natural reading to connect with this one, because there Paul talks about how God's word produces life in us and hope. And there is obviously a tension in us sinner saints between our flesh, which is our sinful nature, and the spirit, our new nature that God gives us when we come to faith in Jesus and at our baptism. And so there is that constant tension, and his word is what equips our new nature to rise and come forth and to express itself and to still hold on to hope and to still worship God, even though bad things are happening in our lives.
To not be afraid of the power, to not be afraid of who he is.
And to open yourself to it and to invite him to come into your life. It can be very jarring. When we pray, thy will be done, that can be a very scary prayer. Because what if God's will for you is to do something that you are terribly uncomfortable with, or that you've never done before, and it can scare the bejeebers out of you.
Yeah. If you say, God, please use me for your purposes, you don't know if the purpose is, Lazarus, you're going to die. Don't be afraid, but I'm going to use you to show God's glory. And how is that? A good segue into the gospel?
I think so, because the gospel then really is a wonderful story about the resurrection power of Jesus, plus how this sends a signal to the religious leaders.
Yes.
This guy is really dangerous. Too many people are believing in him. We're going to lose our following. We're going to lose our influence. So we got to get rid of him. And the other interesting detail is that if you go to the next chapter, John 12, it also says they realized how dangerous Lazarus was after his resurrection. So they put a contract out on him. And they decided to kill him too.
Yeah.
And we never hear how long Lazarus lives after he's resurrected. I would love to have been able to interview him and say, what was it like while you were dead? You know, and did you resent the fact that if you were already in glory and enjoying heaven, you had to come back here now and have to live in this squalid mess we call planet Earth, you know?
But again, if you say, God, use me for your purposes, is that one of the purposes?
Exactly. And if he's a man of faith, which we believe Lazarus was, then he would rejoice that he could be used to the glory of God and to send this wonderful message out that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. You know, and that's why I love the conversation he has with both Mary and Martha, because they both express the same. If you'd been here, our brother would not have died. You know, and you wonder how much of a little bit of an insult was there in that, or at least an expression of impatience with Jesus and his decision. And he says, this is all for the glory of God. Be patient. It's kind of like, it's back to what you were talking about. You've got to wait on God's timetable. Yeah.
And you've got to wait. In this case, they knew he was sick. He was dead 4 days.
Yeah.
So Jesus waited 2 days, and it took him, 2 days to travel. Yeah. So he's, as the mayor of Munchkin City said, he was not merely dead. He was really most sincerely dead. He was dead, moldering in the grave.
Yeah.
And there was no doubt that it's not like the Jairus' daughter. They could have said, oh, well, she wasn't really dead. Or the young man from Nain, well, you're going to bury him the same day, maybe. No, Lazarus was dead, and he was stinking.
And I think there may be an allusion here to a rabbinic belief. The belief was that the Pharisaic rabbis had a more powerful prayer than the average Jew because they were such holy men. And there are stories of rabbis who are able with their prayers to revive the dead. But I have yet to find any story of a rabbi who was able to do that beyond the third day after death. Because there was a belief that's preserved in some Jewish legends that the soul hovered over the body for 3 days before finally going to the realm of the dead. Jesus intentionally waits until the fourth day to put himself in a league of his own. There is no story that I can find. Now, maybe somebody out there will find one and they can email it to me. But I don't know of another story. And I think, now I'm just guessing, but I'm guessing that Jesus did this intentionally to say, I am not your normal rabbi. I am in a league of my own. And therefore, he waits the 4 days to put beyond any doubt, this is a very powerful and a very divine figure here that is raising Lazarus. And he does it just with his word. He doesn't have to do any hocus pocus. He doesn't have to touch him even. He just says, Lazarus, come forth. And out of the grave comes Lazarus.
I think it's similar to the 10 plagues in Egypt. The Egyptian magicians matched the first 3. And after that, they couldn't come close.
Exactly.
God proved himself to be more powerful than anything else, and Jesus proves himself to be more powerful than any magicians or any other rabbis.
There's a great story about a preacher who was doing an evangelistic sermon I can't remember when or where, about the raising of Lazarus, and a detractor from the audience yells out, well, why did Jesus even have to call him by name to bring him back to life? And the preacher quickly responds, because if he hadn't said, Lazarus, come forth, every dead body on the hillside would have come out. And so there is a confidence that the word of Christ is powerful. It's just the same word that he participated in at creation to bring everything out of nothing.
This is the word
and
made
so this
flesh.
is the word made flesh, speaking the word, and the word tells us that we too will have a resurrection. And when he comes back on Judgment Day, he will raise up all the dead just as he raised up Lazarus. And he won't have to do anything. He'll just say it, and it will happen, you know. And that gives us hope, I think, as Christians who live in a world of turmoil and conflict and disappointments and heartache, that if we resort to his word and find refuge in his word, that word still has life-giving power, even when we're feeling kind of dead and lifeless and without hope. It speaks life into us. Yeah.
He said to Martha, he said, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?
Yeah.
There's something that has to do with believing that it will happen and then it happening. There's a connection there of how was it described to me once that Jesus throws out the life raft, the life tube, and faith is the act of grabbing hold. It's not that we save ourselves, but if we don't grab on, then we will never be saved, or we will never see the wonderful things. I told you girls that this would happen. Just believe, and everything's going to be okay. And whether they doubted in a moment or they couldn't, how do you think? You think Jesus is really going to raise him back from the dead? But that this glorious thing happened in front of them. That how can you live the same kind of a life when you've witnessed something like this?
There's a wonderful insight when we have the shortest verse in the Bible express the fact that when Jesus sees all the chaos that's being expressed and all the weeping that's going on at the tomb of Lazarus, that Jesus himself weeps. He wept. Shortest verse that we have in the New Testament. And Edith Schaeffer, in her book on affliction, provides a suggestion that I think has some validity. That is that when you look at the Greek word that's used there, leading up to his weeping, it uses a word that says he was disturbed or he was bothered. Well, it's even more intensified than that. It's like a horse snorting, that he was angry at what death had done to his creation. And he was angry at how sin had ruined the perfect world that he had created. And he was going to do something about it. He was going to bring this dead friend of his back to life. And he's going to do something about it for the whole world by giving resurrection to the dead through his resurrection on Easter. And so here in the fifth Sunday in Lent, we're getting close to that celebration of resurrection on Easter. And this is an anticipation of that. But it's also a prophecy of what he will do for all of us who die in his arms. It's
a beautiful, warm, wonderful story. But it is also, as you said earlier, it's the beginning of the end. Jesus is now certainly a marked man. What is it? It's verse 50, I think, that they say, isn't it good, isn't it better? Don't you understand it's better for one man to die than for the whole country? They're looking at the physical consequences of Jesus. They're looking at him as being the means for them to lose their position and their status in Jerusalem within the Roman government, and they want to preserve themselves, so they will make him the scapegoat. Not knowing, of course, that they're all following a plan that God has set up. But it is still that anguish that you say Jesus expressed. He knows what he's going to have to do, and he does it anyway.
And he knows he's going to be victorious. And that's why he can embed in this conversation with Martha, he who believes in me, will live even though he dies. And he who lives and believes in me will never really die. And so he changes death from being the end of a dead-end alley into a passageway, into life with God in glory. And so there's a lot of rich anticipation of Easter in this story. Yeah.
He did it once, he'll do it again.
Yeah, exactly.